Halito, Sio. Hello, my name is Kristin Gentry. Sachafuyak Kristin Gentry, Choctaw Sia, Ishki Sia, Tangsaliampona, Seshki Patricia Benjamin, Saalatik Jewel Shooting Star Gentry. My name is Kristin. I'm a citizen of the Choctaw Nation. I'm a registered artist for my tribe. I'm also a registered artist for Arts and Public Places for Oklahoma. So I have some public art pieces. Typically throughout my tribal casinos, I do dual corporate commissions between Starbucks and the Choctaw Nation. So if you visit those stores in there, if you're not a Starbucks supporter, you're welcome to just go in and look at my art. Yeah. So I've been doing CAM for a few years. I've never done a demo here, and so I wanted to do one. I get questions all the time about how I do my watercolors. And then we learned it's unfortunately, this view is slightly smaller than any actual canvas size I have, so I'll move it around. If there's something you want to see that I'm not showing up here, I can show you. This one's just display, that way I could show you a completed piece. That piece will be going actually to the Choctaw Cultural Center this month. I have my very first solo exhibition there, and it opens next month on the 23rd. So that's a piece for that. And that's the first time I've used corn imagery in my art. Typically all I've done is the florals for this body of work. And I started this one about 2021, 2020. It was right before the pandemic hit. There was a large group of Native artists and I and other artists in the state. We were in Tulsa for the drawing rally for Philbrick Museum. And I was making these small ones to be able to do this a lot quicker. In a live drawing rally setting, and so I was working on an exhibition with Tony Tiger and Bobby Martin. I'm sure most of y'all know them. Bobby is unfortunately health-wise not here this weekend, but Tony's out there. And when they saw me making these small ones, they were curating an exhibition and included me. It's called Speak While You Can, all about your own Native language preservation. And so Tony had asked me to create a piece, an entire full sheet of watercolor paper. I'd been doing maybe 4x4s, and an entire sheet was a 22 by 28, so it was really large for me. It was the first time I'd done that. And then I also incorporated an entire poem written in Choctaw that I had done. And for me, I was really happy because that was the first time I ever written something entirety without using a dictionary or asking a fluent speaker. And so from there, that's kind of this body of work kind of created itself through that. It's really cool that I can have that connection with Tony for that, because I always think of him for helping me to make these larger. And then I was able to start making my acrylic series larger, and that's kind of how I got into that public art side. So instead of just doing these small floral watercolors, then I was able to do large format pieces, and then I was able to start doing murals and all kinds of things. When I started with CAM, I was a co-op artist with the Southeastern Indian Artists Association, and I served on the board for CF for maybe 5 or 6 years. So we still have a booth out there, but I do have a solo booth this year. And that's how I made it all the way to here. I just want to give you all a background on that. I did my undergraduate at Oklahoma State University. I did painting and printmaking, and they paired us up with mentors. And unfortunately, and I'm sure most of you know, Benjamin Harja, when he passed away, that was actually my mentor. And so I had worked with Ben for about over 20 years before that happened. And I got to actually paint the mural with Jay Redcorn in Ben's last show. Ben and Jerry and Jordan and Craig had a show at Oklahoma Contemporary Art Center, and Ben just passed a few weeks before the opening. So that was kind of the first time I'd ever got to do work in a show with him, so that was really special for me. And then we had CAM after that, so it's been over a year now. So that's who I studied with at first, and then I finished up my master's degree. I started at the University of New Mexico. I lived in Albuquerque, and then I had moved back to Oklahoma at Southeastern Oklahoma State University in Native American leadership. And so I always tend to do daytime roles, typically in the arts or some type of nonprofit community support job. So my first bigger one that most people probably know of, I worked at First Americans Museum right before it opened, and then worked it through that opening. I worked in the museum store there, and I got to sell a lot of the work for a lot of the people we have out at CAM and all of our other amazing Oklahoma artists. So that was really exciting, and that probably helped me also expand my career because I got to meet so many new curators that way and new artists. I was really thankful for that. And now I work for the Capitol Hill Business District in Oklahoma City, and I'm working to bring out, I'm project director for Callesto Cinco. We're building an entire plaza, so think of like a plaza like you'd see in Santa Fe or Mexico. It's a heavy, even though it's an indigenous population, it's heavy Latina and then Hispanic. So that's what I do for my day job. And then I get to do my art on the outside. I've been doing it professionally probably about since 2005. And I do all kinds of mixed media pieces, watercolor, printmaking. I make jewelry. I get to do some curation. I write for Native American Art Magazine, one of Cherokee Art Market sponsors, so I always like to give them a shout out. And I'll go painting. Yeah. If you ever ask my friends, they would not be surprised that I have to actually tell myself to paint instead of talk. I realized when I was doing a little bit of this in my booth, I had a crazy amount of questions about what this was. So obviously our kids don't use them in schools anymore is what I've learned. So I still use my compass. My father was an architectural draftsman prior to AutoCAD, so I'm used to drafting tools. Yeah. So I start these paintings multiple ways. So this one is one of the methods where I would have started like this piece, and it's a little bit what I tried to paint some just so I could show. And I'll put it under a view for you so you can see some of it up close, I guess. So what I tend to do is use my compass and stencils to do different circular shapes. Sometimes I do a singular or double outline, and I tend to not ever do it a complete circle. Typically, when I'm painting this body of work, what I'm thinking about when I use these circles is kind of like where I'm gonna put the flowers. I'm gonna put larger circles on this one too. Like where I'm gonna put them, and I always think of them as if I was watching in an aerial view actually, so kind of like the camera's view of dancers as we go around, and specifically like Southeastern dancers are fuller skirts, the more cottony fabric is able to like fan out. So kind of like that, that's what I always in my head. So it's kind of like a macro and micro view at the same time. And then a lot of times I'll add back in some geometric repeated shapes. Sometimes I use diamonds, sometimes I use triangles. I use the diamonds pulling from my Choctaw culture with our, we have snake dances, we have that diamondback pattern across our contemporary regalia. So I always like to have that in there, and I just like the repeated geometric. So I put those in there, and I just think of that dance circle. I also think of life cycles, because all of my work includes nature. I'm an ancestral seed gardener. I work with seeds from the Cherokee Nation and the Choctaw Nation seed banks. And I do a lot of foraging, and sometimes I get to do some cooking, like traditional cooking demos for that, and we do foraging outings. So when I get into working, that definitely goes into what I'm creating from. So that's how we do that. And then sometimes I do them like this. And so if you happen to see my other piece I had entered for competition, it was the hummingbird. And so it has a more in the background instead of just a flat white. So this one I used like aerosol and spray paint. You can see my stenciling. I kind of like doing that too. That gives it just a totally different mood. I mean, it just gives it an almost darker mood instantly instead of having so much white open. But I like it both ways, and I like the cleanness of that, or sometimes I like it a little bit where it goes into this little more abstraction. I also kind of equate my style for this as jazz. I'm actually a jazz musician as well. I play bass trombone for that. And so I think of it as when you have all of those notes already with you, so when you're playing music, you get to arrange them how they want. That's how I paint for watercolor, and that's how I paint for acrylic. I don't typically work from a sketch unless I'm doing a corporate commission where I'm required to do sketches. Otherwise, I get to do, it makes me the most happy to be able to work freely, to be able to kind of choose as I'm working, as opposed to being so strict. I guess I just don't like that replication of the exact same thing, and that is probably a big part of my style as well. So we'll do that. It's like my finger in my pants. And so I use cake. People always want to see. So I use the little cake pans is what they're called. This is a Prima brand. Yeah, the Prima Tropicals. It's been my favorite for a very long time. Sometimes I'll have some of my friends that make pigmented watercolors by hand. I'll have them make me some sometimes. I've made paint before with clay pigments. When I did that mural specifically with Jerry Redcorn, which would probably make sense since she's a potter. So this is where I get in. I was like, if you're adults, this is the part may not be as exciting because it's just using a compass. And I don't typically complete the whole thing because as we're dancing, even though we do complete those circles when we're dancing, there's natural human breaks. I just like the imperfection because I am using tools that people typically use to create perfected things. I like to not do that. Yeah. That's how I build my the composition for me, because my flowers are going to follow these. So even though it probably looks like I'm not doing anything, in my head I'm thinking of like what directions. And a lot of times I'll paint those, like the swirl, our water symbols that go into it. Sometimes I'll use our mound builder iconography too. I don't know how much shows up since this canvas is larger than the view. And between these two, as they dry, I'll go back and forth because it's hard. Once I tilt it, it will move my composition since it's a watercolor. Yeah, I'm trying to work where you can see. And since this one had some spray paint on it, you'll see it resists a little bit, so it's kind of, it goes in like one spot. Sometimes then I'll do an entire piece. Yeah, there we go. I'll do a piece all in like one color scheme. Sometimes I don't know what I'm gonna do. Sometimes I'll start with one and then decide I'm gonna make it a whole cool colors, or I'll do the full. And for a long time, I just did the flowers. I just love them. I still love making them. Until I have an 8-year-old, and she just basically was like, Mom, why don't you like draw some butterflies? So I started adding in other flora and fauna eventually. Yeah. And watercolor is typically done in lots and lots of layers, so it's sometimes I have to be careful about getting a lot of pigment all at once. These are very pigmented because I want to be able to see through it still. Yeah. It's actually a little bit strange to talk and paint. It's one of the only times I don't typically talk to people. Yeah. This is also always interesting for me because whatever's underneath it will also play into like that color, because it's watercolor, you can see through it. So that's always nice to get the difference. Sometimes I'll use my spray bottle if it's drying out on me to remix. If I didn't like how it dried, like I may like wash that back out, and then if it bothered me, or just paint over it. I also use a lot of masking tape sometimes to do some landscape sections. Yeah, so we'll let that one dry for a second while I work on this one. And so like I said, I don't like to draw exactly like what flowers look like. Not sometimes, the majority of the time I tend to paint Indian blanket flowers. It's our state wildflower here in Oklahoma, so I like that. I have tattoos of it. So I just look for a central point. I might scoot over so you can see this one. Let me move this one, spill my water. Yeah. I know it's a live painting, but a lot of my work is just mixed media, so a lot of it's also drawing. This pen is dying on me. Let me find a different one. And some of my pens on purpose are waterproof so that it doesn't move when I do watercolor layers on them. And some of them are not on purpose so that they do blend in, they become part of it, and they kind of alter edges for me. It kind of gives it a darker, almost like a shading, so I kind of like that. Let me try this one, see? I keep pulling on mine that I need to change out. There we go. I'll hit two of the ones that are dry. Later, I'll probably make these either into another circle set. I might make them into medicine wheels later on. I'm just making the middles of my flower. And so for these flowers, they're not actually any specific type. It's just a flower, and they get to become what they want. Which is, if you had seen my earlier work when I first started, that was very opposite of me. I wanted everything clean and neat. It probably makes sense that I was working with Ben Harjo. His work is very tight and clean. Let's see, so I'm looking for a pen that's gonna work for me. Let's see. 12. Okay, this one has some. There we go. Okay, good, you can see. So this is where it's just kind of, I say it's like that jazz because it's just so organic. I don't have any, like obviously there's no petals there, so I'm literally putting them wherever I want. I tend to do a triad on the outside, that way I can kind of fill it in and make it balance a little better. Sometimes, like where it's between the more pigmented and less, I'll make it maybe the like 2 different flower petals. Kind of just depends. And my whole entire life, like I've always drawn with like some type of calligraphic line, which I didn't know what that was when I was a kid. I just knew I liked to draw like that. But having like that different width and line weight, it's always been just a part of my practice. I always enjoyed things with lines going through them, trees, rocks, the corn silks, and I know that's very stylized. I've never been like the flat style type of painter, like that native style. But the stylized, I really appreciate from that. Yeah. And then I don't know how many paintings of these I've ever done, so I don't even know, like, sometimes people ask how many flowers I've ever made. No idea. Yeah. So one of the pieces, not one, the very first commission I'd ever done, it was for the Choctaw Cultural Center itself. They do calls for them, and I had submitted, and they wanted to create a new piece, and I think that one was 9.5 feet tall. And when they talked to me about it, like maybe the first or second time, the content they wanted me to create was about one of our ancestral seeds called the aricito, which is our squash. And it looks like, it's not really like a football shape because it's more bulbous, like the, maybe like a yellow-meated watermelon. They're kind of more longer instead of like a circular round watermelon. So they're kind of more elongated like that. And it has, some people had called it a sweet potato squash. When I grew it, it was kind of like that, a mixture between a pumpkin, and a potato texture. But the like shelf life, I had never seen a food in my life have that long of a shelf life. I remember like the first year harvesting them, maybe in September, and my mom had visited me for Christmas through New Year's, and it was still perfect by New Year's. And it was just in the pantry, like nice dry place, and that was it, and I was just blown away. So it's kind of interesting to me. I wonder what type of shelf life we've also, through all our genetic modifications of the foods, I'm guessing that's probably changed the shelf life. And I didn't realize it. Yeah. What was kind of ironic about that part, the whole reason I was telling you that story, when they were talking about the squash, at the time, the people I was working with at the Cultural Center, they didn't know I had done any type of gardening with that specific seed. I'd already grown it the year before. So it was like a little like kismet moment. Yeah. That's really the gist of how I do the flower parts. And then I just look for areas I can enhance with different types of line weights. I'll get out different markers for different widths. Did anyone have any questions? I could also answer those. Just watching.
Is this something you taught yourself, or
So I remember, my very first body of work, I did it for my undergrad. It was a series of like studying plants like this, but it would be like one singular plant at a time. It wasn't a whole bunch of small ones. I kind of started that in high school. I was originally going to do a music education career for myself, and I chose other things to do. I met my ex-husband when I was 18. I decided to stay in the town we were in instead of going to Stillwater at the time. So I decided to change majors. I had always enjoyed art. I had never thought about it for a career. I was going to be a band director, so I knew I wanted to be a teacher. I'd always wanted to do that, and so I went into art education instead. And I actually did that. I started as a teacher. I taught in Stillwater right after. I actually got my position before I finished, so that was cool. I was working part-time at the Stillwater Multi-Arts Center, and the lady in charge of the program was retiring that year. And I'd been working there a few years part-time, teaching community art classes. Yeah, but so like the technique, so when I would make that body of work in college, it did have figures. I had people in it. I had done a piece of Dr. Jessica Harjo, who is also an artist. She's not in this show. She owns Wampe Designs, if you've ever seen it. She's several different tribes here from the state. And so there were portraits of different indigenous women from different Oklahoma tribes. I think Jessica was Miss Indian Oklahoma at the time. And like her sister had modeled. So I have all these, it was all Native women, and I was just showing the different floral patterns from their regalia that was being reflected in like the flowers around that they were modeling in. So I kind of like that duality, the real thing and then the fake part of it, that replication. And we were also in Tulsa when I started doing that and doing all those in Tulsa, just watching how much of the Art Deco is influenced, I think, from the Osage and the Oto ribbon works, to see all that. And so it was neat to have that third little connection while I was doing those. And so as I was like painting these portraits and these flowers, watercolor, when it's like this, naturally, if it's not on a flat surface, these weren't totally flat when they were drying. Typically the wash would have been more all the way across, but they naturally create like little like variations. It just does, that's just how watercolor is. And then a lot of watercolors try really hard not to do that. They try to create really nice flat washes. I mean, that's how I was taught. And I was just really kind of struggled with that. I remember like learning that technique, and I didn't necessarily understand, because I thought like this looked nice. I like that looking. And so I then I thought about, well, I could use like pen and ink. And I was like, well, if I'm going to keep them in there and they're considered imperfections, I'm going to make them really imperfect. So then I started kind of shading them, and then I just switched to outlining them. And then it almost became almost like mosaic looking when I was doing it, which this kind of does. This one I kind of just went over and ignored that line. But a lot of times I'll include those in it. Like over here, to me, that naturally already looks like a petal. So and it created it all by itself. I didn't create that one. So so I don't think I was necessarily taught this technique. I think I was taught not to do this. Yeah, I was working with Jack Titus. He's a watercolorist. He's retired now, but and then because I'm a printmaker too, like that is it's just so different, because printmaking is so clean and so perfect. And so I was always like struggling to link between my printmaking and my painting. And I had always done that, like having all those different things. So what I started doing is I would do stuff on paper and maybe like cut it apart and sew it back up, and then like use it in the printing presses. And it was just a lot of deconstruction of looking at regalia, looking at what tribes brought what parts, and how they were influenced in like mainstream culture. Like I said, the Art Deco, the Osage and Oto, those designs that people consider not native at all, but they were taken from our culture, basically taken over and rebranded as something else. That's what I think Art Deco. Yeah, that symmetry, the replica, yeah, right, yeah, those parts, the mirroring. Yeah. And that's pretty much how like I do the flowers. Then I go around, and then I would switch. Let me see, I'll show you. For my next part, I gotta find a smaller. So this is a brand I'd never really heard a lot of, so Arteza. And they're triangle shaped. And I don't know if it's because I'm left-handed or not, but these work really great for me. They don't smear as much. So I can do my smaller lines. So I just love to use the lines to create movement. That's really important for me in my paintings. And I like when people can look at it for a while and then they kind of realize or see a lot more things in it than they had the first look, because there's just always so many tiny little details. And in my regular life, I'm not like that. I'm not like really particular into little bitty detail things. So I don't know I am in art, but I like it that way. And I'm just kind of spending time with it, which kind of sounds silly. And when I do printmaking, mostly I do wood block relief because I like to be able to have kind of like that, that connection. And I always, you say, we ask the wood what it wants to be, and I kind of follow the wood grain a lot to do that. Yeah. Try to use the line work to simulate a little bit of shading. And these always almost end up looking like, like hummingbird, some type of fluted flower to me. Yeah. So since I have my own laser, so I don't always just do the triangle, because sometimes I said I do the mound builder ones, so a lot more complex design. So I had never used spray paint in my whole life ever until I had done that first mural in 2021. And I just liked, I guess the effect it gives, because again, it wasn't like a perfect flat. I mean, you can make it flat, solid, but it's really easy to do halfway push it, and you get you don't get the solid. Yeah, that one. And let's see, let me see if I can show you the other part. I might have to flip the canvas. Let's see, I'll flip this around and show you there. There we go, there's some more of the spray paint stencil. Depending, if I'm doing acrylic, I actually like the stencil a lot better because acrylic will cover over it without resisting. The watercolor is quite difficult to paint over, but I kind of like it. And then sometimes I'll move the paint back. So I was it's all on one half. Yeah. Sometimes I let it drip, sometimes I don't want it to. Yeah. It's just it's my little happy place that I do, and it's a nice quiet for me. And I kind of like that I don't ever really know what it's going to look like in the end. And I know that's different than a lot of artists. They want to know exactly. I don't know how much you can see. Sorry, I'm left-handed. Work on the purple ones on. Yeah, so that 22x30 is still the largest I've ever done in this style. So maybe one day I'll make a giant piece out of these. They just take a lot longer. I'm not sure how I would do a mural because I can't really do this style that way because it would the paint would. Yeah. I might have to do it in almost like stencil layers of spray paint and just do it to simulate it, but it wouldn't be the same. You guys can't even see that, I realize. Let me see if I can turn it. Typically, yeah. I mean, they might use a slide, but yeah, most people flat. Mm-hmm. I think most people typically work from a sketch, or even if it's a loose one, I think. Some people, their sketches look just like a finished piece too, though. It's all different for every artist. Yeah. This technique is nice too for me, so that like, because I already have the splashes, like I don't have to be perfect, which is hard to do that with watercolor. That's why a lot of people they tend to not go toward watercolor because of that. If you make a mistake in watercolor, it's kind of hard to fix it. Because acrylic and oil, like you can paint over it. You can't necessarily paint over a watercolor too easy, with watercolor anyways. You can paint over it with other materials. Yeah, but for this style, that doesn't necessarily play into mine, so yeah. But I've really been enjoying adding in different, like I did the corn there, that growing corn. Mm-hmm. That one is watercolor, yeah. That one doesn't have any spray paint. That one's just watercolor and ink. Mm-hmm. Oh, and some gel ink. I use a metallic gel inks. They work really well. You'd have to get up close probably to see it. But I added some gold like on the corn pollen parts, yeah. I like having all the line variations. And I like to do it on canvas too, and that one comes just from a business standpoint. People tend to buy work on canvas before they do on paper. So I tend to paint on canvas, which is a little more difficult for watercolor. It's a whole different ballgame. Paper is so much smoother and it absorbs very differently. I probably would have liked designing textiles in the 60s. I know. And then I've also started translating my work into clothing. I launched, like this is one of my pieces, I launched this summer at Santa Fe Annual Market. And then I've just been doing them at different markets and getting that out there. I haven't done any fashion shows yet. But I've produced fashion shows throughout the years for other designers, so it'll be nice to do one for myself. Never done that. Sorry, the left-handed part. I should come this way to see, you guys can see. I don't understand how Bob Ross now could work and talk and paint. That would have been hard. And sometimes they'd have his animals too. Next year I get to do a show at the state capitol, and that'll be, I think, in November of 2025. So you can come see. I'll probably make some big ones for that. Oh, you cannot see where I'm working. Let me move back over here. Oops. Thank you. Let's see. I'll work on a different one so I can get in a little better spot for people. This one, because this one has a lot more on it already finished, so you guys can see more of the flowers. There we go, so you can see. Yeah. I can do the part where I go on to the next step. So sometimes I've already done the large part with the large circles, but this one I haven't. Yeah. It's just very, wherever I want to put them. The compass is nice, so I can do the double lines. This is kind of backwards. Typically I do this so that I can create the flowers along with the circles. This way I did it the opposite. So now I can kind of put them where I want them. This pen is great. There's lots of stencils. I like to rotate a lot. So then also for when they're displayed, they can be displayed in different orientations. I try to make sure the composition looks nice all the way around. Yeah. So then when I do some like geometric, I would look for something that like maybe goes through. I'm like, that's a great one because it hits all that. And then I try to match the size. Yeah. Let's see. I mean, in this one, obviously it's pretty self-explanatory for using a stencil, but it just looks so pretty. I just love how the design ends up moving your eye so much. And then I do that like probably all the way. And it'll just pull that vision that way. And then I always try to do my direction the other way. And if I'm commissioned by certain tribes, I'll typically ask them, or people from specific tribes, I'll ask them which way they dance, because people dance in different directions or they enter different ways. And sometimes I work on top of ledger paper. Since I'm not a Plains tribe artist, I don't really, like I said, I don't do the flat 2 style. So when I do ledger, I usually either do like serigraph, like silk screen prints, or I do this type of watercolor on it. It's really nice. I have several sheets from Oklahoma Territory time, in between Indian Territory and before it was the state of Oklahoma, which is really cool because a lot of times when people see that, they didn't know Oklahoma was ever called that. And then it's also, it's like a sad and kind of eerie thing, but typically the paper I use is all before any of us were citizens of the United States, so that's always a strange concept. And then I happened to find a 1926 ledger from Tandy Leather Factory, and so I really like, I don't know, that just seemed so ironic to me to create like actual, like native art on top of their work. I don't know, it seemed ironic. Yeah, I'll move my hands just a second. You can see the whole pattern. Yeah. And then I'd finish it and like go back to and stop. And then I like to go typically behind the flowers with these. I don't typically draw the triangles over the top. And then some people would probably not leave the line works or they wouldn't go over the flowers, but I don't mind. I like the layers. I like how to keep going, doing that. Yeah. Let me do some more. Let's see. like the texture of this paper is so different than that canvas. This is a lot easier. And this one's a gold iridescent, so once it blends in, and interestingly, this specific one likes to fight with the water. It almost resists, so that's kind of an interesting chemical reaction going on that I hadn't expected in paints. And these end up almost looking like little weird planets. Yeah, so I just keep doing that and rotating and drawing and working on different things. In my brain, I'm like, now I need like all the tiny little lines. Just give it more movement. Yeah, you guys can see. It's really cool to be able to see it up there. Let me see, I'll show you one of the gels I use. Oh, okay. All right. I just want to say thank you all for watching. You're welcome to come check out my booth in number 146. You can see what I have. You can look at my fashion line on creativenative.com or follow me on Instagram, same handle, Creative Native with a K. So, thank you.